Pilot Boys in the building. Welcome to the Pilot Boys podcast, where you'll get the real on all things sports, music, and pop culture. I am Mecca Don here with my co-host V.
Eating some cheap chicken wings right now.
You gotta do what you can. Today is April 16th, 2020. Thank you guys for tuning in. I know you could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. We are still quarantined and social distancing due to this coronavirus pandemic, but we're still going to figure out a way to bring you content at all costs. We have a big show today, V.
Excited for this one.
Yeah, on today's show, we will talk to Chris Holtmann, the head men's basketball coach at the Ohio State University, about recruiting, handling the pandemic, eligibility, and much more. We will also do some news and notes of popular sports, music, and pop culture stories from around the country, from Drake, sports in China, Stephon Marbury, Kyle Larson, toilet paper, and more.
It's going to be an action-packed show.
Oh, yeah, action-packed. And shout out to our Patreon subscribers. Remember now that our $5 and up Patreon subscribers will get our episodes on Wednesdays, a night early. These donations help keep our show going. If you want to help keep us on air, you can donate at www.patreon.com/Pilot Boys Podcast. And don't forget, grab some Pilot Boys wristbands at shop.pilotboys.com. Let's go.
Where the Pilot Boys at? Pilot Boys, we get on up. We gon' fly, boys, we getting up. So high. Pilot Boys, we get on up.
You're listening to the Pilot Boys Podcast. Our next guest is the head coach of the men's basketball team at the Ohio State University. Please welcome to the show, Coach Chris Holtmann.
Great to be with you here. I really appreciate you having me on. Obviously, we got a lot of time right now to do stuff like this, so it's great being with you guys. Glad to do it.
Absolutely. So yeah, we're gonna jump right into it. We have a lot of stuff that we wanted to talk to you about kind of for a while. Obviously, as we followed your career, followed you through Ohio State, and then obviously now through this pandemic. So we're gonna jump right in. V, kick us off.
Yeah, let's start by just talking about your coaching journey. On this show, we like to talk to people like you about your why a little bit. And if you could just start by telling us what got you into coaching, why you decided on it as your career. And you have a vast range of experience from small school to kind of what they label mid-major to now a big conference program. Just if you could just take us through your journey and your why.
You know, I think all of us typically go into a field where we were maybe influenced the most by someone that we saw, or it's a teacher that we saw that we were inspired by, or a coach, or a dad or a mom who inspired us to follow in their chosen field. I think so many of us are naturally, what inspires us draws us in. And I think ultimately I was inspired by the coaches in my life and my college coach. And I followed him. And I think in a lot of ways, my dad would have probably been a college coach or would have been a high school coach. But, he grew up in a time where his dad passed early. He had to take care of his family. He couldn't go to college. So I had to find a way to work a few jobs and make ends meet. And that's how he, lived his life, providing for us. But I do think he kind of all along would have loved to have been a coach. So I think it was a little bit in my DNA. And at the end of the day, I saw my college coach impact lives and change lives. He was incredibly demanding, but he had a profound impact on me. And I jumped into it after a couple years of college or post-college stuff where, like all of us, you're kind of wandering a little bit.
Yeah.
I found out that I wanted to go be a GA. Went back to my alma mater, was a GA, and from that point on, I got the bug for sure.
That's great. And so you have a kind of like a really like blue collar Midwest type of story in looking at your coaching trajectory. Can you kind of tell us about like the different experiences from the difference between being at like a smaller program. I think you started at Taylor University. I think that was your first
Yep,
job.
I did.
And then you went on to Gardner Webb and then on to Butler. Just the difference in those experiences and how each of those kind of played a role in getting you where you are at now.
Well, you said it. I started at the small college level. I started at Taylor University, then went to another NAIA school, Geneva College, and then back to Taylor University. And those are small NAIA schools where you got to work 3 or 4 different jobs. I was going to grad school at night because I thought I was going to be a small college coach where you needed your master's. And then the more I got into it, I said, you know what, I'd like to be able to recruit and coach at the Division I level. And how was I going to get in to that? I don't know. I was going to need a break somewhere. So I knew someone who knew somebody at Gardner Webb, and he put in a call. And my wife and I went from Taylor University, where at that time we were making a salary, I think collectively of around $60,000, and I took a job at Geneva College for $26,000. And we just hoped that my wife would figure out a way to get a job. Moved into a 1-bedroom house, didn't have kids, and worked that job for basically 5 years, and then took an assistant job at Ohio University, where I worked for 2 years for John Gross, who's now the head coach at Akron, who was the head coach at Illinois, tremendous coach, and then went back a couple years later when they were looking for a head coach at Gardner Webb, and kind of talked my wife into it. She was pregnant. She did not want to leave Athens, Ohio. She had great support group there. She wasn't inclined to go back to a smaller school, even where she just had made peace with being at Ohio, and I wanted to be a head coach. So I kind of won that argument.
You got one for the men. Thank God.
That's right. I'm 1 for 49, I think, the last count. So I won that one, and then just took a really different path. So I was at Gardner Webb. It was a massive rebuild, and in year 3 we won the most that had ever been won at the Division I level there. Had a great year. Finished second overall in the league, and I was fortunate enough to be coach of the year. Just got a new contract, a lot of momentum, but an opportunity to go and kind of be one of the lead assistant at Butler University came around, and it pulled me away. It was a very difficult decision. I actually remember calling Thad Mata and saying, "Hey, Thad, what do you think about doing this?" And he was like, I'm not sure it's a good idea. And he along with others, kind of advised me against it. And a couple others said, "Hey, go make the jump."
Yeah.
And
especially because you were going from a head coach job back to an assistant coach. That's kind of not typical, right?
Yeah, it's very atypical. And the biggest thing for me was at the time Butler was moving, and I was friends with Brad Stevens and friends with the coach that had gotten the job, Brandon Miller. But the biggest thing for me was they were moving into a power league, and that is the Big East. Mm-hmm. Many people think of Power 5 in football. It's about Power 6 or 7 in college basketball.
Right.
So the Big East is very much a part of that group. So that was my biggest reason in going there, and I just thought it would be an opportunity for me to go there and then maybe get a job in the MAC if we won at Butler at a high level. I had no idea the dramatic change that would happen in the next few years in my life, in my friend's life, and ultimately in my career.
Yeah. And
I have a question.
Go ahead.
A question too. I wanted to follow up on something that he said. Coach, when you talked about kind of your coaching trajectory, it just made me think of this question. You know, for someone who wants to get into coaching, right? A young guy or a girl who's, looking at this as a potential career, what advice would you give them? Because your story sounds very similar to every other success story that I've heard, which is you started off doing grinding, right? Doing the stuff that a lot of people won't do. And, it's through that process that you were able to emerge and get what you ultimately, get to the ultimate big goal.
You got it, Mecca. I think that is the reality. Is you have to own where you're at. Your feet have to be firmly planted. And while you might have dreams and ambitions about what you want to be down the road, the reality is those dreams and ambitions they're not honored if you're not firmly planted, if your feet aren't firmly planted in performing at a high level where you are. And there's nothing wrong with dreams and ambitions, and that's part of who we are. And I took a major risk. You take risk in your career, you kind of bet on yourself. But the reality is I when I was given the interim head coaching job at Butler, I would not have been able to perform that at the level that I needed to if I'd have skipped steps in my career. And I just don't think you can skip steps and be successful in this business at all. The moments where you're, making $6,000 as a graduate assistant starting up, and you're in that position, you thought it was going to be 1 year, and it ends up being 3 or 4, but you grind it out. Like those really provide great benefit for you as you progress in your career.
Absolutely.
Definitely. And wanted to spend a little bit of time on Butler, right? Because it is a fairly unique position and job, because it seems to be a springboard for so many great coaches. If you could just tell us a little bit about what makes that place, or made that place so special, and why it produces so much, and a little bit about what the Butler way is, because they aren't your big powerhouse school like an Ohio State or a Duke, but they have built a culture there that has been consistent and has done well through the test of time.
Well, it's a great question, and there are some things that I think make it unique. It is the way the university is set up. Is it one, a great emphasis on basketball for sure, but I think in general it attracts a student and a student athlete who are coming to that place with the idea that they are going to, for certainly for basketball, that they're going to play for championships. Obviously, we had a young man there that's in the NBA right now, actually with the Timberwolves. So plenty of guys go there with aspirations of the NBA, but there is this common thread, and it's said really well by the definition of the Butler way. There's this common thread that you're coming to play and be a part of competing together for championships. And Barry Collier, who is longtime athletic director there, has done an incredible job putting a culture in place where they're very specific in the kind of people that they recruit, and they've had incredible guys through a number of years there, like Ron Norwood, who was a multi-Final Four team. They've had incredible leaders and incredible people that have been attracted to that place. And I think for me, it was, quite honestly, I told people when I got the job, it was kind of my Camelot. Like I thought it was going to be, for me, I thought it was going to be my last job. And that was where what I was going to do. And I was given the job under really unique circumstances because, if you've ever had a boss or worked in a situation and he has losing or failing health and you have to step in, it's a difficult transition. And that's what happened. And fortunately, I had a tremendous group of fellow assistants where we rallied around each other. And I think what really changed the game for us is we went into a year where I was the interim and had gotten the job in October, and we were picked to finish, I believe, 8th or 9th in the 10-team Big East, and we ended up finishing 2nd in the league. Wow. And from that point on, it was a good next few years.
Seems like winning follows you everywhere you go.
Well, I tell you, I've been fortunate to. Appreciate you saying that. For every month except for January, I think winning follows.
Right.
But I told somebody the other day, my wife doesn't even like me in January. So,
Hilarious.
but
That's
yeah, we had a good run there, and have had a good start here as well.
Well, you mentioned earlier also in the conversation, you mentioned Thad Matta. And a couple episodes ago, we actually had Jeff Bowles on as a guest who also, spoke a lot about Thad. And it just seems like, Thad just had so much influence, whether, directly working with him or just kind of knowing him, has so much influence in the basketball world, more than we even as Ohio State fans even knew about. If you could just spend a little bit of time just talking to us kind of about your relationship with Thad, and maybe even how he may have helped your transition into Ohio State.
Well, Thad is great. And I think when people reflect back, and they have now, Mecca, I think they've been able to look at his tenure here. And when you put it in the context of the previous 40, 50 years, it's pretty incredible. I've told people before Thad got here, I don't believe we had went to 3 straight NCAA tournaments. He went to 7 straight. Not only did he go to 7 straight, but he was winning games and advancing. It was the greatest run in the history of Ohio State basketball.
100%.
And dominating the conference as well.
Yes, and dominated. That had not been done at all, really. Obviously, the 60s were impressive, but in the modern era, the last 30, 40, 50 years, it had not been done. Mm-hmm. So I think it's incumbent upon me to as coming in, to recognize that for what that is. Granted, there were some difficult years at the end there, and there was certainly some concerns about overall, where it was headed, and I think more than anything, just Thad generally had some health issues, and I think probably I think people were kind of wondering, hey, is this time in terms of his mind too, just to get something different. So I get that towards the end, but no one can. His impact was significant, and it was the greatest run in the history of Ohio State basketball. I think, again, outside of that 60 tenure. So I think, I don't know Thad great. He was great with the transition here. I say that Thad and I are friends, but it's not like we talk every week or anything.
Right.
But I have great respect for him and Barb and their family. And, I think that, he's in a pretty good place right now. I think he's enjoying kind of the time away from coaching and spending time with his family, and he's earned that.
Right. And you also mentioned earlier in the conversation too, about when you were at Butler, you kind of at least at a certain point thought, this is it. This is the job I'm going to have. And then now, obviously, you're at Ohio State. So talk to us a little bit about that. What made Ohio State job so attractive, and made you kind of, I don't know, break out of that feeling of like, oh, I'm going to be at Butler indefinitely?
Yeah. Well, I'd been approached about other jobs, really not after my first year, but after my second year, I was offered a couple of jobs. And then after my third year, when we went to the Sweet 16, is when I had 3 or 4 that I would consider good Power 5, high major basketball jobs. And one in particular, I kind of had a thought about a good job in the ACC, but I was just committed to staying at Butler for a variety of reasons. And then, when I had never really in my mind thought of this job, I had heard a little bit that who knows how much longer Thad's going to do it, and some of those kind of thoughts, but nothing I didn't even ever speculate. So when Gene called, it was a search firm who called first and said if I'd have interest. I said, yeah, I'd be more than open to talking about it, but I wasn't at that point. I was still pretty committed to staying at Butler, And, Gene and I had a great first conversation, but I just wasn't, I was concerned about meeting with him, and because I had a team to coach. And I think he took that probably as me saying I'm interested. I just wasn't sure.
Right.
But to Gene's credit, he was very persistent.
Yeah, we know Gene.
Yeah.
He's going to get it done.
Yeah, he was very persistent, very honest, very kind of cut and dry. Hey, this is where we're at, and I hope people feel good about that, and I hope people feel good about our tenure here to start, because we've really enjoyed it. My family's really enjoyed Columbus. We've loved Ohio State. It's been a great move for us. There's no question.
Well, I think culturally, you guys fit in amazingly. I mean, obviously, you fit in seamlessly, even just I don't know, your kind of relationship with the football program and, supporting all the other sports and all that other stuff. And a lot of the charity efforts that you guys are doing even now, kind of fits in seamlessly with kind of the culture of Ohio State. One question I did have, though, also about Ohio State, and we talked a little bit with Coach Bowles about this too, is kind of it's known as a quote unquote football school, right? And I think, even though obviously Ohio State has a very rich basketball tradition, it is sometimes in a lot of ways overshadowed by football. What challenges, have you seen, at least, so far in your tenure, that's created? Or has there been a way to even kind of use that to your advantage?
Yeah, I think I've really always looked at it as a benefit and not as a negative. I do think that it's a question you have to answer at times. Hey, are you guys just a football school? What is the energy and excitement, enthusiasm around the other sports and around basketball, coach? You get some of that in recruiting, and you certainly get fan bases from other, when you're recruiting kids, you get a ton of other fans who will go at kids we're recruiting. Hey, it's just a football school.
Right.
It's just a football school. And, you get that quote unquote negative, and probably that comes up in some recruitments. But I do think, listen, we had 4 out of our last 5 games were sellouts in a 19,000 seat arena. There is an energy around our program. Now, admittedly, in a place as big as the Shot, it takes a little time when football's in season for fans to come around in a place that is as large and as hard to fill as the Shot. We understand that, but we had a great crowd at Cincinnati. We had a great crowd for Villanova, but they're certainly divided, and rightfully so, in November and December. And we've kind of embraced that. I love our football program. I've loved getting to spend time with the football coaches and supporting them. I've loved connecting with a lot of the different programs around here. And to be honest with you guys, it's not like I'm clamoring for more attention either. I'm fine where we're at. I'm fine, in the position we're in. I think we can compete at the highest level, and we're trying to build towards that. We've done some really good things in our first 3 years, but I don't look at it as a detriment at all.
Right. And V has some questions on recruiting and kind of this, the pandemic. But before he gets there, I have one other question I wanted to ask on the season, basically about the season this year. Before it obviously got cut short, how would you kind of evaluate the season, right? Because there's so many ups and then seeming downs and then ups again. And how would you, as a coach, it's different from a fan's perspective, but as a coach, how did you evaluate the season?
Well, when you look at the season in its entirety, guys, so we were obviously finished top 20 in the country in the AP and the coaches poll. I think that's 2 out of 3 years. We had the highest, what's called KenPom ranking, which is an evaluation tool where it evaluates your team, and it's a little bit predictive in nature. We were 8th in the country in that. We were one of 6 teams to finish top 20 in the country in offensive and defensive efficiency. We had 5 wins, I believe, over top 10 teams in the country. So we finished tied for 5th in the Big Ten. I would have loved to have finished higher than that, certainly. But all in all, I felt like it was a good year, a really good year in a lot of ways. And I think it had the potential, guys, for us to be looking back and saying, okay, this is a team that took the next step, whether that's getting to the Sweet 16 or whatever the case. Like, we took the next step.
Mhm.
I think it had the real potential for that based on our numbers. You know, overall, I'd look back and I'd say it's just incomplete. But, you know, we had, I think, the third best overall record in the Big Ten.
Right.
We had a lot of great moments. I'd love to forget January, but I think January helped us in February and March, and you have to embrace those areas where, you know, when you struggle. So I feel very good about the third season. I feel really do. And I feel very good about us moving forward as well. We're just going to be different without the big fella and his brother, for sure.
Just how competitive is the Big Ten Conference? Because it seemed like you guys early in the season, the non-conference part dominated, but the struggles really started once you guys got into conference play. And even within, you looked at the conference, no one was really able to dominate. It just seemed like it was a bunch of really, really good teams throughout the conference.
Well, that was the case, V. I think that was the case, and you guys saw it. And I think, you know, we got killed. I think our fans were jumping off the bandwagon in January. And I wanted to say, listen, have some perspective here. Look, Michigan State was picked number 1 in the country. And like in the preseason, we were picked, I think, 18th or 19th. And the reality is when it was the best, deepest league in the country. And when you have a coach as good and as accomplished as Tom Izzo say to you in a handshake before the game, this is the best and deepest I've ever seen the Big Ten.
Wow.
Then it's like, okay, you get it. You get the fact that I mean, Izzo said that to me. Turgeon said that to me. Guys that have been, Painter said that. So when those guys are saying that, veteran guys who've been in the league for a while, it wasn't us guys that are in our third year. It was certainly the best I've ever seen it. But so what I think what that meant for us is we could have very easily had a number of teams that would have got to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. But I get it. I would have loved to have been able to, you know, not go through some of those issues. But I do think it prepared all of us who went. I mean, every team in the Big Ten had a week and a half in the season where they lost 2 out of 3, 3 out of 4, 4 out of 6. Everybody did.
Yeah.
I think it would have really helped all of us move into the tournament.
I think so as well. It was amazing to watch the games as fans. We were talking about that a lot throughout the season, just how competitive everything was. And you have to have some perspective. I think that's the hard thing is your fans want to win every game, right? And they think you're supposed to win every game. And especially when you start out like we did, where you're beating top 10 teams in the country. I think it's that it raises that level of what can we be. But teams, you know, take different shapes throughout the season. And I give our guys a lot of credit for responding like we did in those last 12 games. Wanted to switch gears to recruiting. Obviously, recruiting in basketball, especially big-time basketball, is what I think is one of the more challenging things to do, right? Because there are so many different things that are involved in that process, right? From potentially having to recruit one-and-done players to now the new transfer rules. If you could start by just telling us, like, do you have like a philosophy when it comes to recruiting? From our vantage point, it looks like you have a very methodical approach to the type of players you recruit and how you envision this team looking under your watch. If you could just kind of tell us a little bit about your approach first.
Well, I think, listen, I think the reality is our game is evolving and changing. And it has been for the last 5 to 10 years. And you guys probably know that because you follow the game, but your common fan who might watch football, college football, college basketball, you know, it's hard unless you're kind of really an insider in college basketball. You don't understand that the transfer rate is 30 to 35% for Division I players.
Wow.
That's high.
So I don't think like it's hard for people. I think it was 30 maybe as of last year, maybe in college football, I think is like 14%, 14 or 15%. So you don't like, it's a different, it's a different game. For example, when you look at the Final Four teams from 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, look at all the Final Four teams in those 4 years. There was one starter that was a 4-year transfer, and that was Ron Lewis, who played for Ohio State. Well, then you fast forward that to the previous 4 years. There were 13 players on the Final Four teams that started that were 4-year transfers.
Wow.
So it has changed. I do think the bulk of our roster will always be high school kids that will grow and develop. But there'll be a blend of transfers as well. And that's I think going to be the way probably a lot of places are going to do it. Not just us. I think it'll be, but we'll always have a blend of the bulk of our roster will be high school kids along with some transfers.
What are your thoughts on the recruitment of one and done players and the impact that they can have on a program, right? They have a huge impact,
yeah,
but it's always short lived, and like the pros and cons of that.
Yeah, it's you got to have a contingency plan. I think if you know you're going to recruit a one and done, I'm not opposed to it at all. There's some great examples of one and done players that have been really, really successful. And I think sometimes guys come in and think they're going to be one and done and realize it's probably going to be a little bit longer than that. And obviously you even benefit even greater in that situation. But I'm not opposed to it at all. I think it just has to be the right fit for us. And you have to have some degree of understanding that it's going to be a pretty short-term situation in those cases.
Right.
I have a question too about kind of recruiting and not just recruiting, but just kind of the state of youth basketball as a whole. AAU. We've talked to other coaches and athletic directors and different people in basketball about AAU basketball and what that's done as that's grown, what that's done to the game. What are your kind of thoughts on youth basketball and AAU basketball and how that's kind of had an impact on the overall state of the game?
I think just generally there are a tremendous amount of really good AAU programs and really good AAU coaches. I think sometimes AAU in general gets kind of a bad rap. But I think there are a lot of great programs and great coaches and that are really in it to help kids get scholarships, help them with their futures, help them prepare for what's next. And honestly, those are the kind of programs we try to be heavily involved with as much as possible. That's what we're trying to do. I think there are a lot of people that now you certainly have some exceptions where kids or coaches, whether it's all coaches are out more for themselves than for the kids. But we found a lot of programs that really try to do their very best to help kids in terms of their future. And those are the ones we try to recruit from.
The relationship with Ohio State and the world's greatest basketball player, LeBron James, he obviously is a sponsor for the athletics program. Guys wear shoes. He has a locker in the facility. How does that kind of benefit the overall brand of Ohio State in basketball? And also, are you guys planning on recruiting his son?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not trying to bail here, but we actually can't talk specifically about recruits.
Okay.
But what I will tell you is, I just think when you think about LeBron's impact on our game, and when you think about his influence on this state and how he's used his influence, it's amazing. And it's an incredible credit to who he is. So to be associated with him in any way is an incredible thing for our school and our program. He just is, I think he's the very best of our game. I think he's a tremendous leader. He's a tremendous teammate. I think he's about all the right stuff. I think he uses his influence off the floor to impact people in a really positive way. I'm amazed at how he's used his platform, and we love our association with him. And for for a guy who grew up idolizing Michael Jordan, it's I can honestly say I don't know that I've ever seen a more dominant player in terms of both ends than LeBron.
Right.
We love that relationship.
Yeah, and you spoke about platform and using your platform, and one of the things that you've seen over the last couple months, or at least since we've been on quarantine, is a lot of coaches and a lot of celebrities as well using their platform to kind of either raise money or donate money, which I know you and your wife have done. That's exceptional, and also kind of give awareness on social distancing and the coronavirus and so on and so forth. And I imagine for a coach that this is created an even more unique time than normal, right? You're always kind of coaching your players through adversity, but this creates kind of a different scenario. And so I kind of wanted to get your thoughts a little bit on how you've been handling the pandemic as it comes to your current players and recruiting, and what are some of the things you're telling your players as they're trying to figure out their way through this real big phase that's not just about basketball being stopped, but also about life.
Well, it's a great question, and I think one, you're trying to make sure your guys are safe and healthy and have an appropriate level of respect for what this is.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, they're the numbers, as we know, right, would suggest that they're at a very low risk. That the numbers would all suggest that. Having said that, their families are at risk, their parents are at risk, their grandparents are at risk. And their safety is paramount for us. So we've had that conversation with them. And then, to be honest with you guys, it's been like a lot of Zoom calls, check-ins, phone calls, FaceTime calls, as much as we can do over the phone without it being too cumbersome for our guys. We're like, dang, coach, like,
right.
give me some breathing room.
Social
here.
distance.
Like, you don't want. Yeah, social distance, coach. Get away from me. Like, we want to be like, give them some. They are back home, but I think they are also at the point now where they're like, coach, when's the gym working out? Like, come on,
right.
Like when's the gym opening up here? Like when can we get back to doing stuff, coach? That's where a lot of them are at right now.
Yeah, and as far as like your life lessons that you've been talking to them about, because I'm sure this has been do that. What have you kind of told them? Kind of how have you used this kind of situation to talk to them about life?
I think we appreciate things so much more when they're gone, and that's unfortunate for all of us. I think we at times, even in the midst of our greatest frustrations, we don't value. And we are not as grateful as we should be. And the reality is they are healthy. They play at an unbelievable university, compete at a great place, and compete at the highest level of college basketball. And that was taken away from them. So I think there is an appreciation on their part for what was taken away from them. I know that's the case for me. I appreciate my job more now than ever. Yeah. And I think the uncertainty of none of us saw this coming, outside of, I guess, a few, maybe Bill Gates and a few others. None of us saw any of this coming. So I think the unpredictability of life and the opportunity to, take a step back and appreciate what's most important to all of us, and that is our family and finding ways where we can help others.
Absolutely. And before we're going to transition real quick to something a little more fun and a little more lighthearted, but before we do that, I do want to give you a chance to say something because Buckeye fans right now, and you mentioned this a little bit early, we can be crazy. In football, it's even worse. You can go 13-1, and people think you had the worst season ever, right? So, but in basketball, basketball fans are also really energized. And they're really into this program. And, I'm on social media a lot. And sometimes social media isn't an accurate reflection of what everybody thinks. But you see that there are people who are a little bit antsy. They're nervous about transfers. They're nervous about guys leaving early. They're nervous about the ups and downs of the season, so on and so forth. What would you be kind of your message to Buckeye Nation basketball fans who are kind of looking forward to the next season in the future?
I've never been more excited about a group in an off season, if we have it, together than I am this group. I've never been more excited. I'm as excited as I've ever been, guys. I really am. And I just think we have a combination of guys that I'm really excited about. We've got some things we've got to figure out with losing Caleb's size and Andre's versatility. And we've got some things we've got to figure out, but I'm as excited as I've ever been. And I think we've got 2 freshmen that I'm really looking forward to bringing. We obviously have some young men coming in as well that have played college basketball. But this core group that we have of 7 guys returning, 6 of them have played significant minutes in the Big Ten, and they've been on winning teams. That's the thing we've done here that I think sometimes when you guys, this, what did I hear every time I've taken over a job? What have people told me? Other coaches, that is, they've told me, hey, you'll do yourself a big favor if you lose in year 1 and 2 at a pretty high level. And when I first heard that, I was like, really? Well, how am I doing myself a favor? Because that way people, people don't take for granted how hard winning is. Right. And I think the reality is, we did not follow that advice in our first couple years here. Right. And, statistically, we had, if you look at the numbers, our best year here in year 3. Certainly, obviously, people identify with a couple guys that have decided to move on, and we understand that. But I'm as excited as I've been, and excited about this young group. We got a lot of work ahead of us if we're going to build a sustained team, and we're not there yet. I will tell you that we're not there yet. But I'm very excited about where we're headed, and I'm really excited about this group we have. I've never felt better. I just think, we got to keep working and keep grinding away in terms of player development and recruiting.
Right. As fans,
that's awesome.
As fans, we can tell you we're very excited and pleased with the job you've done. Yeah. Taking over for Thad was no easy feat, but you've handled the transition well and brought success back to the Ohio State program, which we're very grateful for.
Well, and I appreciate that too, guys, and I appreciate you saying that, V. I think the reality is social media is an echo chamber. So when things are, when you have a big win, it's great because everybody's kind of echoing the same things, right? Everybody's echoing the same things. You go back to January when we lost a few. Everybody's it's kind of group think in a lot of ways. Everybody's echoing the same things. Yep. Right. We suck. Our program, our coach sucks. Our players this and that. And we're not going to win anymore. And then, and then, I think what I've come back to, because the reality is social media can be, even to your most hardened coach, it can be extremely, and your most hardened player, it can be extremely hurtful. It just can. Mm-hmm. That's the reality of it.
Yes, definitely.
That is, me being as vulnerable as I can be. It can be, but what I recognize is the bulk of our fans, I think, appreciate good basketball, quality play. Mm-hmm. They appreciate what we're doing and what we have done. And you're never going to make everybody happy. And that's the reality of it. And
it seems like you also, I think I remember you saying too, that you took notes on who was saying the negative stuff or something of that.
Oh, effect. I did.
Yeah. I mean, it's fuel.
I did.
It's fuel. I understand completely.
Yeah. and you can't do it in the necessarily in the moment, but I kind of sensed at one point we were gonna, I said we're gonna come out of this thing in January. So I said, let me reflect back on what people were saying about me, 2 weeks ago. And you had everybody, we're not gonna make the NCAA tournament.
Mm-hmm.
We got no chance, and the program is doomed, and when we finished 9 out of 12, I don't know where all those guys went. Somewhere I don't know where they all went. For some reason they just got real silent. But
they go missing, man, just like Golden State fans this year. No, just kidding. Yeah.
But the thing I do appreciate about this place is when, like, the number of people that come up to me and say, "Coach, we're super excited about next year," and I just think people believe in what we're doing, and there's a trust. And again, you're never going to make everybody happy, and I think you realize on social media that hurt people, and there is a reality that that's part of the age we live in now.
Yeah, and it's kind of comes with the territory, right? As someone who is in a public figure or in the public eye, it's just one of those things that is now part of your analysis on what life is going to be like, and we've dealt with that as well. Before we get you out of here, though, I mean, first of all, this has been phenomenal. We could probably talk to you for hours and hours, but you have, you don't have all day. But we have 2 questions that we want to ask you that are kind of more fun, a little bit off the topic, but give us a chance to get to know you. So the first question is your top 5 musicians of all time. So people that influence you. It could be music that you listen to now or when you're a kid, but just personal top 5 musician list.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is great. So I'm not as probably I'm not great at I didn't grow up being a musician or playing an instrument, but it did have an influence on my life in certain ways. There were bands that I followed or people so I will go down kind of a progression through my growing up years. So
yeah, that works.
I grew up on gospel music in my house a lot. So Shirley Caesar was a big, I don't know if people know who she is, but she was a big part of me kind of growing up and listening to just gospel music. My first, this is going to probably sound crazy to people, but Lionel Richie was one of the guys that I first started listening to. Once I kind of listened to like what was secular music at the time,
Right.
Lionel Richie was the guy that I would follow and listen to a little bit. Loved the Bee Gees.
Mm-hmm.
Loved the Bee Gees. So
right.
there's 3 of them right there.
Yep.
And then as I got into my teen years, U2 was my favorite band.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing band.
And yeah, it was my favorite band. They were my favorite band, and they're the only concert that I've been to.
Wow.
My wife and I flew to Dallas in Cowboy Stadium a couple years ago and saw them, and it was a great experience. So they would be, probably the band that's had the most profound impact on me. Those other 3 were kind of instrumental in my life right now. And then if I were to give you a 5th one, I would probably say maybe Mumford and Sons.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that list. And first of all, U2 they're amazing, and the fact that they're still performing, is just unbelievable. And then again, like you said, the meaning. They have a lot of meaningful songs, right? They weren't just making music, so they made timeless classics.
They did. Yeah, they did. And they were about more than just, I don't know if I sat here and said, Poison, right? Poison's pretty much about partying, and that's what some of my guys growing up listened to, I never got into for U2, there was a substance behind what they were singing.
Right.
But I also, when you're a young kid too, I listened to Tupac, and that was kind of a guy that I listened to some growing up. So it was really a pretty eclectic mix.
Right.
As I've gotten older, I probably got way more into country music than I ever, more than I'd actually probably want to say publicly, to be honest with you. But that's just the reality.
Do you have a favorite country singer?
Oh, I don't know if I have I just have a couple that I don't know if I don't think I do. I just enjoy generally if there's a radio station I'm going to go to now,
Yeah.
it would probably lean more towards that.
Yes. Easy listening. They got good messages in their
Yep.
music. And
Yep.
the second list is definitely more in your wheelhouse. Your top 5 athletes that've had the most influence
Who?
on you.
Top 5 athletes
Of all time.
of all time. To give that some thought here, I will go with. I'm not saying he's the greatest player of all time, but I will say MJ. MJ, just because I would go in this order right now: MJ, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson. Those 3 for sure.
So we know what era you grew up in.
The Holy Trinity right there.
Right.
Oh, I know. Those 3 for sure. I would, it's hard that LeBron in the modern era, just because he's been so fascinating. There's 4 basketball players there. I probably got to give one other guy, and then I grew up a Cowboys fan, believe it or not. Didn't we all? So I would say the 5th one would be Tony Dorsett.
Wow.
Nice.
I'm old.
No, that's a good list, man. Those are legends. You can't go wrong with having any of those guys.
And focusing in on your number 1, with the Michael Jordan documentary that ESPN's about to release that we're all looking forward to. What is it, as a basketball coach, we like to ask this, what is it that made him so special and so almost superhuman, right, as a basketball phenomenon that we haven't seen until recently with LeBron? And even with LeBron, like the consistency that Jordan maintained for such a long time of winning is almost unheard of.
Yep. Yeah. I would say the most extreme level of combined extreme level competitiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just to a whole nother extreme. And then you combine that with elite athleticism and high level intelligence. I think that combination just made him into, arguably the best. He and LeBron are the two best players I've ever seen play.
Yeah. That's kind of, I think, obviously how we grew up. We both grew up as huge Jordan fans, and we've obviously, I don't want to say transitioned, but we've obviously also developed a similar, if not same, respect for LeBron. I mean, we've had, as basketball fans, we've had a really good run with transcendent type of players. But Coach, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for joining us on the Pilot Boys podcast. Hopefully, we get back to a sense of normalcy soon. We can get back in the off season and get this thing going. But we will love to have you back, obviously, too, as hopefully the season progresses, and make sure you guys stay safe during the social distancing period.
Yeah, you guys too. Thanks for what you do in terms of entertaining a lot of us, and it's always great seeing you guys around. Feel free to would love to hop back on with you, and my sentiments are the same. You guys stay well and stay healthy. You and your families do the same.
All right, take care.
Thanks
Coach.
so much, Coach. Have a good one.
All right, guys. Take care. You too.
All right.
Love the Pilot Boys podcast? Support us on Patreon. Supporters can pledge as little as $1, and we have some cool perks on there. Check out www.patreon.com/Pilot Boys podcast. Show us some love today.
You're listening to the Pilot Boys podcast, episode 23. V, that was an amazing interview we just had with Chris Holtmann. That was awesome.
Yeah, I have a tremendous amount of respect for him, as I know you do too. Being the head basketball coach at Ohio State, it's one of the more difficult jobs, right? Especially with football looming over, and the way he handles it is amazing, and the success we've had is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, he handles the job with class, like I told him on the phone. I feel like he's been somewhat of a seamless transition from a fit standpoint to Ohio State. It's probably what Gene Smith saw and why he was so persistent. So happy that we have him, and obviously, hopefully we can get back to normal pretty soon so we could start to see them in action. But let's hit some news and notes, man. There's a lot of stuff going on, sports, music, pop culture. Even though the coronavirus has shut a lot of things down, but there's still a lot to talk about. One thing in particular, I guess, as it pertains to the coronavirus, is the big question of when are we going to get some type of semblance of sports back, and when is the economy going to open up? When is the business going to open up? And then obviously for us, when are sports going to open up? China actually opened up their professional baseball league in Taiwan with no fans though, and they had cardboard cutouts and robots in the stands to kind of imitate, what fans would look like. There haven't really been any issues there, but on the flip side, also in China, their Chinese Basketball Association, they have now postponed again at least until July. They were actually slated to start back up April 15th. But then, new concerns have kind of popped up, and they've been shut down since January 24th. So, what are your thoughts kind of on, where this thing is, and when we do open back up, is this, no fans thing? Is that going to be the new normal?
Yeah, I guess overall, I'm just a little concerned with any of this happening. I understand why it's happening, and we have to figure out how to get back to normal. But it's the seeming rush to try to get things back open and have sporting events with large public gatherings. That shouldn't be our priority right now. But with that being said, completely understand the nature of business and how that works, and the Chinese thing with cardboard cutout fans. That's a different level of thought right there, right?
Yeah.
Of putting into this thing. And to be honest, I don't know what the answer is. I don't necessarily feel comfortable having the conversation, but I do understand, especially as a sports fan, that I miss sports a lot, and also the role sports play in kind of keeping people calm and enjoying something during times of crisis. I completely understand that. To have that taken away too, I understand why we're trying to get back to it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, I think we always have to follow the medicine and the science, right? The health experts, they're obviously not perfect, right? Some of this is projection because you haven't seen this before, so they're not going to necessarily get everything perfect. But I think, following their lead, really at the end of the day, that's really the simplest and probably the easiest answer here. Is whatever they tell us to do is what we should do, and obviously not just them. Obviously, you get to talk to economists and stuff like that and figure out how things affect other aspects of the world and the economy. But that is kind of my take on it. We talked about this a little bit before in one of our actually Pilot Boy shorts about whether opening up with no fans if it's not safe for the fans, how is it safe for the players? I think it's not necessarily means that it's ultimately so safe for the players, but it's just that you could probably control a lot more when you're testing just individual players, and you could do it daily, and you could control that more than you can control a crowd of 100,000. But then you have like Florida governor who now deemed WWE an essential business in Florida, and so now they're allowed to kind of get back to normal without fans. They're allowed to create the production without fans, and there's a big uproar on social media about that. But one of those things is, and you just mentioned this, is follow the money, man. You got to follow. Eventually, money is going to force people to do certain things.
Yeah, and it seems like Florida's governor just seems to not be doing anything right in his response to this pandemic. Come on, WWE. It's not just about letting something go on. It's the signal and the message that you're sending out. Like, how in any world can WWE wrestling be deemed essential? In any world, right?
Yeah.
And he didn't shut down the beaches.
And that's why that there's money involved. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And it's scary because, the sad thing about how some of these people are making decisions is that first of all, the wrong decision here or a bad decision here can cost people their lives, right? So this isn't just like, a regular run-of-the-mill good decision or bad decision. This literally could, determine life or death, number one. And then number two, the wrong decision at this time could affect what happens to you in the future. You may not, say you don't want to social distance now, or you don't want to shut down beaches now, or you want to deem certain businesses essential now, then you might see a rise of this thing in August when a lot of other people are coming out of it. And then now you have to put in precautions then. So,
and that's the worst thing that could happen, right? Is for us to open up too early and have to deal with another shutdown. And those are consequences. Even when you're thinking about the money, if you're smart and you're logical, you think about these things and factor it in and say the short-term benefit does not outweigh the potential long-term cost here. It's fairly common sense. We talk about this all the time. Let's make sure it's safe out here before we start opening anything back up.
Absolutely. And, it's, not obviously, not to get too political, but it is one of those things that you think about and that maybe people will think about as they move forward, who you actually, elect and who you appoint and, who you support, they actually make decisions that can affect your day-to-day life. So it's an important thing to think about. But all the things, again, we talk about this coronavirus and we also like to talk about positive things that happen as a result. One of those things is Diddy. He raised money doing a dance-a-thon for healthcare. $5 million he raised for healthcare workers. I think LeBron joined as well. It was pretty interesting that it was on IG Live and, Jennifer Lopez joined when A-Rod joined. That was kind of weird, kind of like didn't expect to see that. But, a lot of people are actually trying to come together or trying to use their platform, as we talked about with Coach Holtmann, to actually do something positive. Did you get a chance to see that or check that out at all?
I heard about it. I didn't see it. I've been hearing about a lot of these IG things. I'm not, my time on IG is usually spent posting something real quick, scrolling real quick and,
Right.
and getting off. But
Yeah.
I did hear about it through the news. And, I think, it's great to see people coming together, just like you said, to see Diddy and J-Lo together. It's like
Right.
we all know about the separation and the fact that what happened, and then having A-Rod on there. It's like in times of crisis and pandemics, it's like you realize and value people, right?
Yeah.
I've found that with myself, just valuing the people in my life a lot more, talking to them more consistently. We've all been separated, but just also creating causes that raise money and being creative and finding ways to entertain creatively. It's been amazing to see.
Yeah, and speaking of that, DJ Premier and RZA had a kind of a battle, a beat battle, the other day on, not just a beat battle, a song battle, basically, of all the songs that they've produced over the years on IG Live. We've been talking about these and there've been a lot of them, but that was one of the best ones. They had hit after hit after hit. It was amazing to see that as well.
And also, in today's era with how production is done, if we know about DJ Premier and RZA and like what they actually do to create a beat and did to create some of these beats versus what you have to do now is completely different, right?
Yep. And we were fortunate too. We got to hang out with RZA a lot at his studios in New York.
Yep.
36 Chambers. So we got to see some of that stuff firsthand.
It's a science. It's a science.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we were also in Ghostface video too, weren't we?
I think it was
years ago.
I think it was Jizza.
Jizza. Okay.
Yeah.
I was in the Ghostface video.
Okay.
Video, but then we were also in Jizza video. So
Fun times. Wu-Tang forever.
Wu-Tang forever. And, speaking of music, Drake, man, he's it doesn't matter if there's a shutdown, it doesn't matter what's going on. He's going to continue to make history as he did this week with Tootsie Slide. It's the 7th song that he's had debut number 1 on the Hot 100 charts, ties Mariah Carey for the most. What is it about Drake, man? It's just, you talked about consistency earlier in a different context, but you're talking about just over a decade of just hit after hit after hit. What is it, man?
I'm going to start by saying not to discredit rapping, but Drake is not a rapper. He is an artist. And in this generation, he is the best and greatest artist that they have. And I think it's interesting when you understand and you follow Drake, we all hear about him all the time. Kind of the things that make him awkward as a person, right? Because we never feel like he's real, that he's inauthentic, or all these things kind of factor into the reason that he's able to make such a diverse range of music that is just so damn good. He can rap his ass off. He's not the greatest singer, but he can sing. But more than anything, he knows how to construct and compose great music and market that music.
So here's the thing, and you hit the nail on the head. If you actually study Drake, you realize 2 things that are very, very important and make him different than a lot of artists. One, He studies music inside and out. Every genre of music, he studies it. He knows it inside and out. Number two, actually, there are three things. Number two, he has his ear to the streets, literally.
Yep.
In every city, in every country, it seems like, of what is hot, who is hot, what are the sounds that are hot, what are the instruments that are hot, who are the DJs that are hot. He knows he knows how to find waves. He knows how to collaborate with artists that people may not have heard of yet, but that he thinks they're dope. And then the third thing, which is not necessarily to discredit him, but I think it's also important when you're painting the complete picture of Drake, is that he's actually a very, very good actor.
Yes.
Right. And the reason why that's important is because he can transform himself into different characters.
Yep.
Literally. And we've seen him do it as an artist. You know, not every song. That's why you can go 12 years and have all these #1 hits, because a lot of his songs don't sound the same. And he's figured out a way to kind of transform himself throughout this period of time. There's some people that don't like him, but no matter whether you like him or not, you have to respect this level of consistency.
If you don't respect him, you're a complete hater.
Yeah. And, you know, there are a lot of haters out there who probably don't care. So
Yeah.
Here's what it is. But speaking of kind of I don't know if we call it the anti-Drake, but you got Tekashi 6ix9ine, who now out of jail. I think he was able to he was supposed to be released, I believe, in August, and he was able to convince a judge that coronavirus concerns were serious and that they let him out of jail. He's already out back trolling, posted his new Instagram picture of him on a mouse trap, with cheese. And what are your thoughts on that whole Tekashi thing?
I mean, we talked a little bit about social media with Coach Holtmann earlier, but what it has done, social media has done, has created a brand under the name trolling, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is everywhere you hear. I feel like I hear that word all the time, and it's become popular, right? It's okay to do it. And I think Tekashi, you love him or hate him, he has mastered this craft. People thought, how is he going to rebrand himself? He's already coming out and creating a joke out of snitching, right?
Right.
And he's generating attention for himself. So, I don't admire it, but at the end of the day, he is very talented within this culture and this industry of trolling.
And I think there are going to be a lot of people that are going to forget and not really care about what happened and what he went through. They're not, there are a lot of people who listen to music that aren't deep into that street culture and code, and they just want to be entertained, so they don't care about that shit. And eventually, I think he's gonna bounce back. I mean, obviously he's in danger just given what we know about kind of that life, but he is gonna bounce back, and people do care about what he has to say. And like you said, people want to be entertained, so he is going to be someone that we're going to have to deal with. A couple funny things, or at least interesting things. One is the NCAA tournament. There's a chicken surplus that happened as a result of the NCAA tournament not happening. My first thoughts were, where are you guys sending that to? Send me some, because you know me. But what were your thoughts on that? It's kind of funny.
It is funny, right? It's like I read into it and it said like last year, right before March Madness, they sold 1.25 million pounds of chicken wings. And this year they sold only 444,000 pounds. And what I found interesting and kind of scary too is what they're doing to adjust for this. They said that the wing producers have shut down processing and packaging plants. They've actually limited the number of eggs that can hatch.
Oh, wow.
And they're reducing the amount of food they're feeding these chickens so that they don't grow as quickly. Those are kind of some of the disturbing
It's crazy. So it's crazy to see how
details.
many different it's crazy to see how many different things, industries, and processes are actually adjusted by this thing, right? So there's obviously the big stuff that we hear about. There's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that we don't hear about. And, there's another interesting phenomenon that's happened, obviously, is the toilet paper phenomenon that we've been hearing about. Even me personally, I've dealt with it. I've gone to many stores several times looking for toilet paper. I wasn't able to find it. At first glance, it was, just like everybody's crazy. But then there's been, some talk and a new article that's saying, hey, hold up a second. Maybe this isn't as crazy as we think. Maybe there's actually a real justifiable reason to it. What were your thoughts on that article?
I mean, I definitely think it's a combination of factors. People we are seeing in real time. You and I have seen it when we go to the store. People filling their carts with toilet paper, right? That's a part of the issue, and that's just human psychology. But the other part of this is and just understanding how everything works, right? We always talk about how do things work.
Mhm.
And the truth is there's a whole supply chain behind toilet paper and all of these goods, right? It's fascinating. I would have never learned this if this hadn't happened, but basically it's broken down into two separate categories, which is toilet paper for commercial use and toilet paper that we see that come in those packages of Charmin that we buy at the store. And they're two
Right.
completely separate supply chains. The delivery method, suppliers, everything is completely different. And what's happened with the coronavirus is that people aren't going to work anymore. So if people were spending their time on the throne at work, getting a 15-minute break, now are spending that time at home. So naturally, the amount of toilet paper consumption on the retail end, which is the toilet paper you buy in stores, is increasing. I think the estimates are that there's been a 40% increase, right? And at the same time, they're like, oh yeah, you should just be able to deliver the commercial toilet paper, but the delivery mechanism's completely different.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, they're delivered on pallets versus packages. And so some of this is obviously pandemonium and panic, but some of this is just naturally how
How the business works.
how the business works and how supply chains work and how they get disrupted, just like everything else in pandemics
Right.
like
And they're saying now that the new phenomenon is hair products, hair dye, clippers, and things that can for guys what they use to do their hair. That's the new toilet paper that people are hoarding.
Wow.
But I'm sure a lot of things will happen like that
Yeah.
the longer this thing goes on. But let's move back a little bit to sports. There are a couple interesting things coming up. Stephon Marbury, for example, has a new documentary. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I read a book called Sacred Hoops when I was younger about Stephon Marbury, and literally he was in New York City, kind of like the next Jesus of basketball to them. He was the real Jesus Shuttlesworth, right?
Right.
And when he came into the league, him and Kevin Garnett formed a dynamic duo. But his NBA career, once he came to New York, didn't go as well as planned. But his story is amazing because he found a second life and has kind of been the American basketball trailblazer in China. What he did in that market and the brand he created for himself, and also his business acumen in terms of the shoes he produced and his social causes. He's just an amazing, amazing story. And I think the documentary is well worth watching. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I love Stephon Marbury in general, just kind of who he's been. And, even as he put out shoes, for kids that, couldn't afford them, right? He went the Starberry route. It was like $14 or, instead of selling shoes for $150 or $200. I mean, he just done a lot of great things. So obviously I'd be interested in seeing that. And I think obviously the Jordan one is coming up too, which is exciting. But give us content, man. There's a lot of good stories out there. Now's a good time to give us some content. What other Ohio State football? Somebody released a graphic essentially showing the winningest programs by percentage since 1970, and Ohio State was atop that list, number one. Michigan wasn't in the top five. I think they were number 6. Penn State was in the top. Alabama was in the top, but Ohio State was number one. And when you think about it, obviously, Ohio State fans are going to promote it, and we're going to talk shit. But when you think about it deeper, what it makes you realize is just the level of consistency that Ohio State has had in winning. We had one. We've had a couple down years. One was my freshman year in 1999, one of our worst years when we went 6-6. And we had to even decide whether we wanted to go to a bowl game. We didn't. It was like. But other than that, I mean, we've had 10-win, 11-win, double-digit win seasons for, so many of those years over so many different coaches. I mean, the amount of consistency that Ohio State has been unbelievable in football.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, for anyone who questions why we are the Ohio State University, that figure should give you your answer. But, getting a little bit more serious about it, it's like it also gives you an appreciation for just what winning means, right? At Ohio State, we put so much emphasis on national championships every year. But the truth is nobody wins a national championship every year. If you win one every decade, you're a lucky program. But what you should measure things by are the consistency, right? The ignoring bad years. Like if you look at that team up north and what they're going through, could you imagine, even when we were losing to them during that Cooper era, we were still winning most of our games and competing for national championships.
Yep.
You know, we just should appreciate what this program does, and whatever it is in the water here, and in the program heads like Gene Smith and the coaches that we've had, the blessing that we've had to maintain the consistency that we have.
Absolutely. And, we talk, sometimes we get frustrated at different years, and, the 2015 year comes to mind, and, we feel like we had the best talent in the country and we should have won, and it'd probably be true, but, you have to do take a step back and, like Holtmann was saying earlier, and put things in perspective, man, because you could have, God forbid, grown up in a different city and different state with different parents, and, been a fan of, some other school that doesn't ever have any expectations. That's probably not nearly as interesting of a life. So, shout out to Ohio State. Obviously, we're going to be critical when necessary, but for the most part, we're very positive and bullish on Ohio State, and we're going to, show love when it's appropriate, and having the highest winning percentage over the last 50 years, I think is a really big deal, and maybe makes people understand why we talk about them so much.
And also why so many people dislike Ohio State fans, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, but we'll take it. You got to take the good with the bad.
Yeah.
Speaking of the bad, Kyle Larson, race car driver, was suspended indefinitely from Chip Ganassi Racing and from NASCAR because during a virtual race that he was doing, he said the N-word. And, it's first of all, it's just crazy that this happened, right? It's like you have an opportunity to do something virtual, which, a lot of people don't right now, and to continue growing your brand, and you do this type of thing. And, obviously he didn't, I don't know if he realized that he was being heard, but the way it came out seemed very natural. It wasn't the one of the, so it seemed like it's not something that he just said for the first time. And now he's suspended, and, during coronavirus, and you're losing all your endorsements and money. And what are your thoughts on it, man?
I don't feel sorry for him at all. And what bothered me more was seeing his fake bullshit apology, right? It's like sometimes I just own who you are.
Yep.
We've both had experiences like this. I grew up part of my life in a very small rural town. This mentality in that world just flows off of people's tongues in those communities, right? And his fake bullshit apology of this isn't how I was raised. I can't believe I said it. No, you're mad because you're paying a price for it. And don't give us that bullshit apology. Just eat your medicine and move on. Don't come out and give us that bullshit.
Yeah, the apology was bullshit. The way he said it, if you heard it, it came off very smoothly. It was not sounding like something that he's never said before. And if that's how you feel, like you said, if that's how you feel and that's how you feel about people or whatever, then own that. There are people out here who are owning it, and they're making a living off of doing so. And, if that's who you are, be that. But don't try to convince us that that's not who you are or whatever. So I'm glad that, they acted quickly. And didn't, sometimes they don't act quickly here, or they do some fake thing like he's suspended for 2 weeks without leave or some bullshit. But they acted quickly, and I think that's a good thing. It sends a message that it's not that shit is not going to be tolerated. Speaking of kind of just pop culture stuff, Ozark, right? I haven't seen season 3, so please don't tell me anything about it. But you guys got me to watch it. I finished season 1. I'm now on to season 2. I'm very glad that I started it. It starts off a little slow so people got to kind of stick it out. But that show was amazing, man. I guess without trying to spoil season 3, if you've seen it already, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I think it's just an amazingly well written show, right? The acting is great, and when you see quality content, you can deal with some of those lapses and slowdowns because you still appreciate the development of the story, right? And I think the thing about Ozark that's unique is just showing like a unique side of this, right? Like how money laundering actually works, and not saying we all should be.
And what it takes and how many different people it takes for it to actually work.
Yeah, and the risk, then
Yeah.
why the stakes are so high. And there's just so many different things about the dangers of a life of crime that it shows without glorifying any of it, right?
Right.
And I think that's just a powerful piece of that show and why it's so valuable.
For sure. And one other thing, politics, Bernie Sanders dropped out of the race and has now endorsed Biden. So now it's going to be Biden versus Trump. Obama came out this week and endorsed Biden. So now it's Biden versus Trump 2020. That is what we're looking forward to in November.
This is the most important election of our lifetimes for a variety of reasons.
It's a big one. It's a big one. So
without going into it, everyone go out and vote, right?
Yeah, everybody definitely go out and vote. And then couple, condolences as we close out news and notes. Tavares Jackson, former NFL quarterback and Super Bowl champion, actually passed away earlier this week in a car accident, which is so sad.
I hate hearing
Young guy. Car accidents, just every time I hear that, it's so scary to me because it's just, as much as we drive, not as much now during the coronavirus, but those are the type of things that can just happen to anyone. Just reminds you much of your mortality. So condolences to his family, of course. And one other condolences is Carl Anthony Towns' mom. She actually died of coronavirus complications this week. She'd been battling it for a month. He actually announced it on social media, I think, a while ago when she contracted it. Had everybody praying for him, but she did not make it.
wow.
Very, very, very sad. So
she was relatively young too.
Yeah, she was. So condolences to him and his family. One, I guess, last kind of wrap up point on the coronavirus is, we always try to, say something encouraging about it, right? Because this is a very tough time period. But as this thing continues to go on, there are more and more people who are getting closer and closer to us who are either have it. You and I have a very, very close friend that actually has it. And more people who are, dying from it. Everyone I know now, it seems like at least knows someone, or at least knows someone who knows someone who's passed away from it. So it's very, very sad. We have to make sure that we continue to uplift each other where we can, encourage each other where we can, check in on each other where we can. If you have opportunity to give a helping hand, or you have an extra $1 or $2 that can support something, definitely do that. But there is optimism, and there's optimism coming out of many sections of the country that, we are at least moving aggressively toward trying to get back to not necessarily exactly how things were, but closer to that at some point in the near future. So let's just keep praying for that, and
keep following those guidelines too. Do not relax.
That's right, and that's very important. If we relax, then we can end up back where we were. So just keep doing what we're doing. But that is all we have for news and notes. You're listening to the Pilot Boys Podcast, episode 23. Shout out to Premier Podcast for helping us get set up during this pandemic. We were panicking when this first happened. We didn't know how we were going to record, but Premier Podcast came through for us. Be sure to check them out for all your podcast needs on social media at Premier Podcast. Check them out on Twitter and Instagram. That's all we have for today's show. Big thanks to our guest, Chris Holtmann. Thanks to everybody for listening. Don't forget, sharing is caring. Subscribe to the Pilot Boys Podcast on Apple, Spotify, Patreon, and YouTube. And please follow us on social media at Pilot Boys Pod on Twitter and at Pilot Boys Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. And follow the host on Twitter. I am at Mechadon Music, and V is at Viswan. And don't forget to grab some Pilot Boys wristbands. Free shipping, plus we're going to throw in some extras. Shop.pilotboys.com.
And always remember, be you. You is fly.
Pilot Boys out!
Pilot boys, we get on up.